The church was bathed in soft sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting multicolored patterns onto the polished wooden floors. Guests whispered nervously, their excitement tempered by a subtle tension in the air. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of the bride's life, or at least, that's what everyone expected. She walked down the aisle slowly, her fingers grazing the lace of her gown as though seeking comfort from its delicate texture. The sound of her heels clicking against the marble seemed impossibly loud, echoing in the cavernous space. At the altar, the groom waited with a poised smile, yet his eyes betrayed a mix of anticipation and doubt. He had always believed that love was a certainty, something simple and straightforward. But today, as he watched the woman he loved approach, something in her hesitant steps caught him off guard. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes darting toward the church doors, as if a secret force pulled her gaze backward. A flicker of hesitation passed over her face, a fleeting moment that none of the guests noticed, but the groom felt in his chest like a sudden chill. The billionaire stood quietly at the back of the church, his presence commanding attention even when unnoticed. He did not step forward, did not call out. He merely watched, every fiber of his being concentrated on the woman moving toward him, toward the life she had agreed to. Yet something inside her resisted. His eyes, dark and unwavering, followed her every motion. There was no anger, no malice, only an intensity born from years of suppressed longing and the knowledge of truths unspoken. As she walked, memories swirled through her mind like a restless tide. Every laugh, every shared secret, every stolen moment they had shared flashed vividly in her memory. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders, urging her forward. Yet each step was heavy with the pull of a love that had never been fully extinguished. She had tried to ignore it, to bury it beneath polite smiles and obligations, but it refused to remain hidden. Guests began to murmur softly, noticing her slight faltering. Was it nerves? Cold feet? The groom adjusted his stance, trying to maintain a calm exterior, though tension gripped his heart. He had planned this day meticulously, had imagined every detail, every smile, every perfect moment. And yet, as she drew closer, something inexplicable hovered between them. A question, a doubt, an unspoken connection that defied ceremony and tradition. The priest cleared his throat, sensing the fragile energy in the room. He began to speak, his voice gentle, urging them forward, yet each word seemed to fade against the electric tension that crackled in the air. The bride took a deep breath, glancing once more toward the doors. There he stood, tall and commanding, a man whose life had intersected with hers in ways no one could understand. The room seemed to shrink around her as the past collided with the present, and she realized that nothing could be as simple as walking down the aisle and saying the words she had rehearsed. Her steps slowed even further, each one deliberate as if weighing the consequences of what she was about to do. The guests watched in polite silence, unaware of the invisible tug-of-war playing out in the bride's heart. Her eyes, once fixed on the groom's expectant face, flickered back toward the balcony, toward the man who had loved her silently, patiently, and without demand. He did not move, yet his gaze anchored her in place, making it impossible to proceed without acknowledging the storm raging inside her. A faint shiver ran through her as she felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but it was not the scrutiny of the crowd that held her. It was the intensity of the man she had left behind. The billionaire's expression was unreadable, yet every line of his face, every subtle shift in posture, conveyed a depth of feeling she could not ignore. He had sacrificed time, distance, and comfort, all to give her the freedom to choose. And now, in this most critical moment, his patience was a lifeline. The groom, sensing her hesitation, reached out instinctively, trying to reassure her, to pull her into the narrative they had built together. His hand hovered near hers, yet she could not meet his touch. Her heart had long ceased to belong solely to him, and in that split second, the truth became undeniable. The life she was about to commit to was not aligned with the deepest parts of her soul. Gasps rippled softly through the crowd, unnoticed by some, palpable to others. The priest paused mid-ritual, sensing the disruption but unsure how to intervene. The atmosphere was thick with suspense, each second stretching interminably. The guests' excitement had transformed into a collective tension, a quiet anticipation of a revelation they could not yet articulate. She took another step, then another, and finally halted completely, her eyes locked on the figure at the back of the church. The groom's smile faltered, confusion and concern etched across his face. In that instant, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable choice. Every heartbeat was amplified, every whispered thought magnified. The bride realized she could not proceed, could not utter vows that would betray her own heart. The billionaire finally stepped forward, his presence filling the space between the bride and her hesitation. Not to claim her, not to command her, but simply to be there, as a reminder of what was true. She felt a surge of emotion so intense it brought tears to her eyes, relief, longing, love, and clarity all at once. She knew, without a doubt, that her life could no longer follow the path laid out for her. She would walk back, away from certainty, toward the love she had always known. The groom's face paled, and the whispers grew louder, but she did not look away. She had made her decision. The aisle that had promised happiness now stood as a testament to her courage, her honesty, and her refusal to live a lie. With each careful step backward, she reclaimed her autonomy, her voice, and her heart. The billionaire's hand reached for hers, not demanding, not pushing, but offering a silent, steadfast support. By the time she reached him, the collective gasp of the congregation had transformed into a stunned silence. The moment was fragile, sacred, and intensely real. The choice had been made, not for spectacle, but for truth. In the quiet that followed, the room seemed to exhale, acknowledging the extraordinary courage it had just witnessed. The bride and the billionaire stood together, their connection undeniable, their bond reaffirmed, and the path forward finally clear. The silence in the church was almost deafening, punctuated only by the rustling of fabric and the shallow breaths of those who had gathered to witness a union now halted. Eyes darted between the bride and the man she had chosen, the billionaire whose presence had seemed both impossible and inevitable. Some guests leaned forward, straining to catch a word, a movement, any signal that might explain the sudden upheaval. Others sank into their seats, mouths slightly agape, as though the enormity of the moment had stolen their ability to react. The groom stood frozen at the altar, a mixture of shock, confusion, and heartbreak painting his features. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a brief moment, he seemed like a man suspended outside of time, caught in a nightmare he could not wake from. He had believed in certainty, in plans meticulously executed, yet life had a cruel way of undermining even the most carefully laid schemes. The vows he had memorized now seemed meaningless, a hollow promise that had been rendered irrelevant by a single courageous choice. Meanwhile, the bride's heart raced in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum. The tension that had gripped her throughout the ceremony now gave way to a complex mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. She had acted on the truth she had long denied, yet the weight of the room's scrutiny threatened to collapse around her. Every glance, every whisper seemed magnified, and she felt as though the entire world had narrowed to the man who had always been there, watching, waiting, and now finally present. The billionaire's expression remained unreadable, a careful mask concealing the torrent of emotion he had long contained, yet his eyes betrayed the depth of his relief and joy. He had waited, endured, and restrained himself, all for this exact moment. There was no triumph in his stance, no victory dance, only the steady, unwavering presence of a man who understood the significance of patience, timing, and love that respects freedom. He extended his hand gently, a silent question, an invitation without demand. The bride, with tears now streaming freely down her cheeks, accepted it, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that spoke volumes. The guests could not ignore the chemistry between them. Whispers spread like wildfire through the pews, some tinged with judgment, others with awe. The church had transformed from a traditional venue into a stage of raw human emotion, a place where societal norms collided with personal truth. Each person present was forced to confront their own assumptions about love, commitment, and courage. The groom's voice finally broke the silence, though it was barely audible, trembling with a mix of pain and disbelief. Why now?" he asked, the words a fragile attempt to understand the inexplicable. The bride's eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Because I cannot lie," she whispered, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. "Not to myself, and not to anyone else." The room seemed to hold its breath again, recognizing the magnitude of her declaration. The priest stepped back, uncertain how to proceed, while the guests waited, captivated by a narrative that had transformed from ordinary to extraordinary in mere minutes. The tension, though electric, had an undercurrent of liberation, a sense that something deeply authentic had been witnessed, something that defied convention yet resonated with every human desire for truth and honesty. Once the initial shock had begun to settle, a different energy emerged. The bride and the billionaire stood together, hands entwined, their presence commanding attention not through wealth or status, but through the undeniable power of truth. The guests slowly absorbed the reality that a life-altering decision had just been made in front of them. Some shifted uncomfortably, unable to reconcile what they had planned with what had unfolded. Others felt an almost reverent admiration for the courage displayed. The groom lowered his gaze, a quiet acknowledgment of defeat mingled with lingering confusion. He had not expected resistance, had not anticipated that love could take such a decisive, unflinching form. In a sense, the reality of human emotion had outmaneuvered all logic and planning, leaving him with nothing but the echo of his carefully rehearsed vows. Outside, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow that mirrored the soft relief in the bride's heart. Every step she had taken away from certainty had led her here, into the arms of a man who had loved her quietly, fiercely, and without expectation. She could finally breathe, a deep exhalation that seemed to release years of suppressed feelings, regrets, and longing. The weight of societal expectations, of predetermined paths, had lifted, leaving only the raw, exhilarating reality of choice and consequence. The billionaire finally spoke, his voice low and steady, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. "You did what you had to do," he said, his hand tightening gently around hers. "Not because you were weak, but because you were brave. And that is why this moment matters more than anything else." The bride nodded, tears mingling with a tentative smile. She had feared judgment, scorn, and misunderstanding, yet what she felt now was not fear but affirmation. Every whispered conversation, every curious glance, every skeptical thought seemed to dissolve in the presence of this undeniable truth. Love, when genuine, could not be forced, manipulated, or timed. It could only be recognized, embraced, and acted upon. As they began to walk down the aisle together, a quiet murmur of realization rippled through the congregation. Some guests offered tentative smiles, others remained silent, but all had witnessed a transformation that transcended traditional ceremony. The church, once a backdrop for routine celebration, had become a theater of authenticity, courage, and the extraordinary complexity of the human heart. The groom remained at the altar, watching them leave. He had planned for joy, for a seamless narrative, yet life had rewritten the story in an instant. The weight of disappointment was heavy, but beneath it lingered an undeniable respect for the truth she had chosen to honor. Sometimes, he realized, love was not about possession, but about recognition, about letting go when the heart demands it. By the time the couple reached the church doors, sunlight bathed them in a golden glow, signaling not just the end of a ceremony, but the beginning of something far more profound. Friends and family began to understand that the day's events were not a scandal, nor a rupture, but a testament to the power of courage, choice, and authentic love. The bride looked at the billionaire, her eyes reflecting gratitude, relief, and a future finally aligned with her deepest truths. Together, they stepped into the world beyond the church, leaving behind uncertainty and stepping fully into the life they had been destined to embrace. And as the doors closed behind them, the echoes of whispered astonishment faded into the clarity of a new beginning. The weeks that followed the ceremony were filled with whispers, reflections, and an undeniable sense of astonishment. The story of the bride who had paused, who had chosen truth over tradition, became the quiet legend of the town. Newspapers didn't cover it, yet the tale spread in hushed conversations, in coffee shops, on park benches, and in the quiet moments between friends. People didn't just talk about the spectacle, they discussed the courage, the vulnerability, and the raw authenticity that had defined that extraordinary day. For the bride, life had entered a rhythm she had never experienced before. Days were no longer dictated by obligations or societal expectations, but by the simple, profound joy of being with someone who had waited patiently, respectfully, and with unwavering love. Every morning began with the warmth of his presence. Every evening ended in conversations that stretched long into the night. The billionaire, though immensely successful and commanding in the world of wealth and influence, revealed a tenderness that left her heart both bewildered and deeply settled. The world outside their private bubble continued as usual, but inside, life had become a canvas of possibilities. Friends who had doubted the wisdom of her choices now witnessed a harmony that spoke louder than words. Family members who had once urged her to adhere to tradition were gradually won over, recognizing the depth of connection and the authenticity that had guided her decision. It wasn't just a union. It was a declaration that love, when true, transcends societal scripts and demands nothing less than courage. Yet, even in this new life, challenges arose. Whispers still lingered in the corridors of high society. Subtle glances followed them at events, and the persistent shadow of what had been almost lost haunted both their thoughts. The billionaire remained patient, steadfast, a pillar of reassurance amidst uncertainty. He understood that healing, acceptance, and adaptation were processes, not events. Each day was a step toward solidifying not just a romantic partnership, but a life built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. One evening, as they walked through a quiet garden, the bride paused to gaze at a fountain, its waters dancing in the golden light of dusk. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't stopped?" she asked softly, her voice barely carrying over the gentle rush of water. He took her hand, squeezing it gently, his gaze unwavering. "I do," he admitted. "But then I remind myself that we are here, together. That's what matters. Every moment we have now, every choice we make going forward, is ours alone. Nothing else changes that." The simplicity and certainty in his words settled something deep within her. She realized that life could be unpredictable, chaotic, and sometimes cruel, but it could also offer moments of unparalleled clarity, where decisions were not just right or wrong, but profoundly transformative. The couple began to travel, attending events not as celebrities, but as partners, as individuals who had conquered fear, expectation, and hesitation. They were invited to philanthropic galas, business forums, and cultural exhibitions, yet every appearance was softened by the genuine warmth they exuded. Their love story became an emblem of courage in the face of societal pressure, a narrative that encouraged others to embrace authenticity, no matter how unconventional the path might appear. Yet the past was never far behind. Messages arrived, some tentative, some insistent, revealing that not everyone had accepted the turn of events. Old friends questioned, colleagues speculated, and the ghost of the nearly chosen groom lingered in subtle ways. Still, the couple faced these challenges together, demonstrating not just resilience, but an ability to confront fear and misunderstanding with compassion. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing documents for an upcoming philanthropic initiative, the billionaire paused, looking out at the city skyline. "It's strange," he mused, "how quickly life can change, and yet how slowly some people can accept it. But I suppose that's human nature, resistant to what it cannot immediately understand." The bride nodded, understanding perfectly. "We can't control their thoughts or reactions," she said. "All we can do is live honestly, and hope that truth has a way of speaking louder than fear. As the rain traced delicate patterns on the window, they held each other silently, feeling the comfort of mutual understanding. Outside, the world continued in its usual chaos, but within the quiet of shared space, life was simple, profound, and undeniably theirs. They were building more than a relationship. They were creating a sanctuary of truth, trust, and enduring love. Months later, an unexpected letter arrived, stamped in a seal so familiar that her heart skipped a beat the moment she recognized it. The envelope carried an elegance that bespoke both wealth and deliberate intent, and as she tore it open, the words within made her hands tremble. It was from a figure she had long considered absent from her life, someone whose influence had shaped her youth, her choices, and the very moment she had almost lost herself. The billionaire stood quietly behind her, sensing the gravity of the revelation without prying. He had learned the value of patience and discretion, of giving space when emotions were raw and choices were delicate. Her eyes scanned the letter, absorbing each line, and a mix of disbelief, relief, and apprehension washed over her. "It's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. After all these years, he finally wrote. The billionaire reached for her hand again, offering steadiness, warmth, and reassurance. "Then let's see what truth has to say," he replied softly. The moment was fragile and tense, and layered with years of unsaid words, unspoken fears, and unacknowledged longing. As she read aloud, the narrative unfolded like a hidden chapter of her life. The letter revealed connections she had never fully understood, explanations for choices and events that had seemed inexplicable, and a confession that altered her understanding of the past. Every sentence carried weight, reshaping the story she had known and forcing her to reconcile with emotions she had buried long ago. The billionaire listened without interruption, his presence a steady anchor amidst the emotional storm. When she finished, tears streamed freely, but there was also clarity, an understanding that the past, though filled with complexities, had led them to this precise moment of authenticity and mutual recognition. "Life has a strange way of circling back," he murmured, "but look where it's brought us." Indeed, the revelation of the letter's contents didn't threaten their bond. Instead, it strengthened it. They recognized that the challenges, misunderstandings, and near misses of the past had been necessary steps, preparing them for a love that was unshakable, patient, and enduring. In the days that followed, the bride and billionaire navigated a delicate balance between past and present, integrating new truths without compromising the life they had built. Conversations were long, honest, and at times emotionally taxing, yet every dialogue reinforced trust, understanding, and the extraordinary depth of their connection. The world around them continued to observe, speculate, and occasionally judge, but within their sphere, nothing had changed. They had chosen each other freely, embraced vulnerability, and honored the complex realities of love, life, and human emotion. And in that choice, they found a profound sense of freedom and joy that no external force could diminish. The city buzzed with whispers, and even the most ordinary streets seemed to hum with curiosity. News of the bride and the billionaire's extraordinary love story had seeped into the public consciousness. Unlike tabloid rumors, this was different. It carried authenticity, vulnerability, and a tale of choices that had defied convention. Invitations to interviews, talk shows, and charity galas poured in. Yet the couple remained deliberate in their responses, choosing to share only what was necessary while preserving the sanctity of their private moments. That morning, as sunlight filtered through the tall windows of their penthouse, the bride reviewed the upcoming public announcement. Her hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but anticipation. This wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration of truth, a confirmation of the life they had consciously chosen. The billionaire, attuned to her emotions, placed his hand on her shoulder, a silent reminder that she was not alone. "Remember," he said gently, "we've lived every step of the story honestly. This announcement is just the world catching up." Her gaze met his, and a smile broke across her face, small, nervous, but genuine. She had walked through doubts, confrontations, and moments of hesitation, and now, finally, there was no pretense, no societal pressure dictating her actions. The world would witness what she already knew. Love guided by truth is unstoppable. When they arrived at the venue, a sleek modern hall designed for press conferences and public statements, the energy was electric. Reporters, photographers, and cameras lined the room, yet the couple moved with grace and composure, their connection unshaken by the public scrutiny. Microphones were set, questions queued, and the room hummed with anticipation. The bride's pulse raced slightly, but the billionaire's hand in hers grounded her, a reminder of the foundation they had built on patience, trust, and unwavering love. The announcement began. Cameras flashed, voices of reporters converged, and the bride took a deep breath. "We are here today not for spectacle, but for truth," she began, her voice steady, carrying clarity and authenticity. She recounted the story with measured honesty, every hesitation, every moment of courage, every choice that had led to this point. She spoke not with regret or shame, but with the confidence of someone who had embraced vulnerability and emerged stronger. The billionaire followed, sharing his perspective, his words emphasizing patience, respect, and the power of love to overcome expectation. Their story was no longer private. It was public, yet the integrity of their bond transformed curiosity into admiration. People were moved not by scandal, but by the courage, resilience, and sincerity displayed. As questions followed, the bride and billionaire answered with grace, never deflecting responsibility, never avoiding complexity. The world watched as a love story unfolded that was anything but ordinary. It was human, real, and profoundly inspiring. After the announcement outside, fans and onlookers whispered, some tearful, some reflective. The story had transcended personal narrative, becoming a symbol of courage for countless others, proof that making difficult choices guided by truth could lead to genuine happiness. And in the quiet moments away from cameras and crowds, the couple held hands, feeling the weight of both the journey they had endured and the new life that awaited them. Evenings in the city had a particular magic, streets illuminated by golden streetlights, reflections of skyscrapers in puddles after a light rain, and the distant hum of life moving forward. In their private sanctuary, the couple reflected on the months that had transformed not only their lives, but also their understanding of love, trust, and resilience. Every challenge faced, every moment of hesitation, had been a stepping stone toward a connection deeper than either could have imagined. The billionaire had arranged a private celebration, a small, intimate gathering of friends and family who had supported them unconditionally. The room was adorned with warm lights, soft music, and the subtle fragrance of fresh flowers. It wasn't grandeur that mattered, but the genuine presence of those who had walked the journey alongside them. As they stood together, hand in hand, the bride reflected on the improbable sequence of events that had brought them to this precise moment. The weddings that never were, the secrets revealed, the letters, the public recognition. It all culminated in a life built on honesty, courage, and unwavering commitment. She looked at him and saw not just a partner, but a confidant, a friend, and a guardian of her heart. The evening continued with laughter, conversations, and quiet moments of reflection. At one point, the billionaire raised a glass, a gesture both simple and profound. "To life," he said, "with all its twists, turns, and surprises, and to love, which always finds a way." Tears welled in the bride's eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. The journey had been anything but simple, yet it had forged a bond stronger than either had dared to hope for. They embraced, feeling the warmth, security, and endless possibilities of a shared future. As the night deepened, the couple retreated to a balcony overlooking the cityscape. Lights shimmered below, and the world stretched endlessly before them. In the quiet, she asked, "Do you ever think about how differently life could have gone?" He smiled, the expression soft yet full of conviction. "I do. But then I remember every choice, every hesitation, Every risk we took, it all led us here. And I wouldn't change a thing. They stood in silence, the city's glow mirroring the light within them. Every obstacle, every revelation, every choice had been part of a narrative that was uniquely theirs. And as they looked toward the horizon, they understood that life, with all its unpredictability, had delivered them to a moment of clarity, joy, and boundless potential. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a rhythm both comforting and exhilarating. They traveled, built philanthropic projects, and continued to inspire those who had followed their story. Letters arrived from strangers, expressing gratitude for their courage and the hope their journey had sparked. Each message reinforced the power of authenticity, honesty, and love's resilience. Ultimately, the couple knew that the world could never define their happiness. It was theirs alone to nurture, protect, and expand. They had navigated uncertainty, faced secrets, and embraced vulnerability, and in doing so, had discovered the extraordinary truth of human connection. Love, when lived boldly and honestly, becomes not just a feeling but a way of life. And as they walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, the city around them alive yet distant, they knew with unwavering certainty that forever had truly begun. Now, in this moment, and in every moment to come,